Okay, we will start the third session for design of steel structures taught by Professor Damodar Maiti. I am Srisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants of this course. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. uh, like always, I'll begin with a brief recap of what we have done so far. Initially, first we looked at the two broad branches of structural engineering: analysis and design. Analysis is a forward problem, that is, we are given the structural dimensions, boundary conditions, and applied loads, and we find the response induced in the structure in the form of forces, stresses, deflections, and strains. And design is the inverse problem, that is, we are given the loads to be withstood by a structure and the criteria on maximum deflection on strain or strains, and then we find the optimum size and arrangement of the structural elements. This course looks at design of steel structures. It is the two steel and concrete are the two most important materials used in design in the world, across the world, and we have already looked at you must already have looked at design of concrete structures last semester. So this semester you learn design of steel structures. Concrete is the most versatile material for construction, but why we use steel is steel has and even the steel is much costlier than concrete. It has some distinct advantages over concrete, that it is stronger than the conventional concrete. It has high strength to weight ratio that makes steel structures lightweight, and steel is ductile, more ductile compared to concrete. That is, it allows a sufficient amount of deformation before it actually fails, so it increases the warning time in case of collapse, before the collapse. So there are there's time to evacuate or to initiate repair and all. And why do we need design? The components individually and the entire structure should withstand the load throughout its entire lifespan, satisfying serviceability criteria. So, the uh, the structure withstanding the load means that the collapse criteria is not exceeded. That is, the structure does not collapse, which is very obvious to perceive. And the serviceability criteria has to do with deflection. That is, no, all the structural component will have a certain deflection criteria, that suppose 10 deflection should not be exceeded in this beam and all that. And a lifespan, before design a lifespan has to be decided upon, which is generally a little lower for residential buildings, a little higher for institutional buildings. And to properly design a structure, we have to strike a balance between safety and economy. So we have to ensure that it is economical without compromising safety, and this is what is called cost effective design. And for that we have to have a good idea about all the avenues we can explore while designing. These are the five mechanical properties of steel that the Indian Standard Code for Steel Design IS 800 to 2007 says. Irrespective of its grade, the grade is generally defined by its yield strength, but irrespective of grade, these five: the density, modulus of elasticity, Poisson's ratio, modulus of rigidity, and the coefficient of thermal expansion alpha, These five are the values that you'll gradually get to remember anyway when you solve problems. Probably you already remember these. And the principal mechanical properties on which steel is graded. Here it is written irrespective of its grade, right? So the gradation which is based on the most important properties of structural steel, that is the yield stress Fy and the ultimate stress Fu. These are what these values we get from the stress strain curve that we have looked at in the first class. Now, the BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards, publishes the IS Handbook number 1 that tabulates the specifications of these rolled sections. That this is the cross section of the steel sections available, and the length can be varied, but the cross sectional dimensions are fixed, and it is stipulated by these standards. It for against each section, this D and this thickness of width of flange, the depth of the web and all that, these can vary according to the section. And against each section, this handbook has tables that includes weight per unit length, geometric dimensions, other dimensions, and other properties like moment of inertia and all that. So this is an I section, a joist, a C section or a channel. This is an angle section. It can have the two legs can be equal of in length or unequal, and this is a T section. These are all hollow sections. The in concrete, the kind of sections we have looked at were solid sections. The cross section were either rectangular or square, but it was completely filled. And here these are hollow sections. This is a hollow square, a hollow rectangle. This is a hollow circle again. But these two are filled. These are bars, and they are of dimension much smaller. Since steel is so much stronger than concrete, since steel as a material is so much stronger than concrete, these bars that have cross section square or circular have dimension much lesser than the kind we are accustomed to with while designing concrete structures. For example, in columns and beams, the cross sectional area where cross sectional dimensions were of the order 250 mm, 350 mm, 600 mm, and in steel that is not, we cannot even imagine that thick section. So these are much smaller sections of the order of tens of millimeters. These are flats and plates. These have one dimension is large, but one dimension is really thin. This is the elasticity curve that we have looked at. This is obtained by performing a tensile strength on the steel, tensile test on the steel. That is, we take a steel. This is a bar. Okay, this is a bar with circular cross section. This one. So tensile strength is applied, and the tensile strength applies is increased, and we note down the force applied that and divide it by area to get the stress. And we using an instrument device called a strain gauge, maybe we note down the strain developed in the structure. So in this sample, so we get a stress strain curve. These are the important points. A is the limit of proportionality till which the stress strain curve exhibits linear behavior. So the and this slope, the stress by strain, as we already know by Hooke's law, is the Young's modulus or the modulus of elasticity. This okay. This modulus of elasticity E, this is basically the slope of the initial linear part of the stress strain curve. And this B is known as the elastic limit. So AB is not linear anymore, but up to B, if we load the specimen and then remove the load completely, the strain will return back to zero. So the specimen will remain return to its original configuration. We will observe no strain in it anymore. But C and D are the yield points, the upper yield point and the lower yield point, which are very closely spaced. So we generally have just one yield stress Fy that we showed here. This Fy is corresponding to the stress at C and D, C or D or the average or something, and the beyond B, what happens is even if you remove the stress completely, there will be some strain remaining in the structure in the specimen that we call the residual strain or the permanent set. And then E is the ultimate or maximum tensile stress, which is the Fu that we use to characterize a steel material. And F is the fracture point, that is when it breaks, when the finally the specimen breaks. And generally we don't load it up to once it has reached this fu. We don't want to load it any further, so that is called the ultimate. We don't generally consider this part of it. And this is the so far we were recapping what we learned in the first class. This is the second class: modes of failure in steel. Bending, local buckling, shear buckling, web crushing and buckling, lateral torsional buckling. All these are related to the collapse limit states, and this is the serviceability limit state deflection. And why is this term buckling coming so many times here? Because, and we didn't hear it in steel, yes, sorry, in concrete structures. In concrete structures we were mostly concerned with bending, force and shear. But here buckling is such a big issue because buckling, according to the Euler's buckling beam buckling theory, buckling is one thing that occurs to a long slender specimen under compression. Buckling is like it when you the stability, it doesn't actually have to do with collapse, but it the stability of the structure is affected. And that happens when a structural element is slender. Slender means that one dimension is very high compared to the cross section area. So in concrete structure, the cross section area is larger, as I said, and in steel, the cross section area is very thin. So buckling is a very important issue here. And the design philosophies we looked at were the working stress method, which is the old method which used to be used up to 1980s, 1990s maybe. Then the limit state design came in, which we are going to look at, because now since the 2007 revision of the IS code, IS 800 code, when it was revised in 2007, the working stress method was removed and it was replaced by the limit state method. And some appendix or something still has some stipulation according to this, the first method. And this we have looked at last class. The basic summary is that the design action or the design load should be less than the design strength. And why does this term design come? Because design is the load and the working strength are the actual ones. The load that while we are designing, what is one of the prerequisites that we need to know? That we need to know what we have to decide on, that how much load I want the structure to withstand. So that is the working load, and then we multiply it by a factor of safety greater than 1, and that becomes the design load or the design action. And why is it greater than 1? Because we want to make a safer design, so that even if the load is greater than what we expected, up to some level we can handle that. And we get the design strength by dividing the actual strength of the structure by some factor, and we divide it again with the same reason, because strength is our friend and load is our enemy in this case, you can say. So the strength we reduce and the load we increase, and both of these contribute to increasing safety. And again, we cannot keep on increasing this load. Suppose you have a load and you multiply it by 100, and then you decide to design it. Will be very safe, but it will be very costly as well. So that is where the midway we have to draw a line between safety and economy. That is the main thing in design. And so basically the design action has to be less than the design strength. And now we move on to connections, which is the topic for this class and next two classes. I think it is a very important part in steel structures that is not an issue in concrete structures, because, as I've said before, that concrete is cast as a homogeneous, as an integrated material. The beams, columns, floor slabs, foundation, everything is casted together. It's not that you bring a beam, you cast a beam, and you cast a column, and then you join them. That's not how it happens in concrete. But in steel, the rolled sections are brought from the factory, and they're cut to the length. The section is fixed. The cross section area is fixed, and then the length you cut it up to whatever you need. The design will tell you the length of the beams and columns, and then you have to join them. So the beams, multiple beams meeting at a point, then them resting on a column, all that you have to join. So the connection is very important in steel design, and it is also very critical, because it is often the weakest link in the structure, and it needs to be designed very very efficiently. So, connections are integral parts of any steel structures that have a major role in the overall integrity. Standard parts are properly connected to create the steel structures, and this is important. Connections make up a large amount of the cost of structural steel, so connection design should be given top priority for both safety and structural economy. There are mainly two types of connections that we are going to look at. There are also a few others, like apart from bolts and welds, there are some others like rivets, but that is not recommended much in the IS code. And see, design we do completely based on IS codes, because IS codes, what they do, the design ones, that the concrete design one was IS 456, and the steel one is IS 800. What they do is, there is a lot of calculation, a lot of research going on in the background, but the code does it is, it takes the results and it puts it in a simple formula based manner, stepwise manner, so that anyone can do it, any layman can do, even without knowing so much detail. So here we'll try to look at some of the details behind it, but even we can't know, because the amount of research that has gone behind it is not really relevant here once you have a shortcut method to do it. So that's why I was saying that bolts and welds are the ones that the IS code looks at. Bolts, you all must have seen bolts. We use it to unscrew uh, bolts we see in like in a torch or any kind of electrical, the electrical uh, plug points and all, we see bolts in the side. There are small bolts. These are larger ones. So what happens is, you put a plate. These are plates, steel plates, okay, and then you have to make a hole compatible, like the diameter of this is the diameter of the bolt, this this shaft part. So you have to drill that hole in the plate, and you have to put it in, and then you have to screw it, tighten it properly. That is the bolted connection. And the welded connections, you must have seen in construction sites, that they cover their eyes and they say don't look at the welding directly, because it has some kind of harmful lights. And they weld the welding is, this is basically molten metal. Welds are made of molten metal. You put the plates, then you put some metal, uh, and you weld it under an extreme heated condition, so that the metal melts and binds these two together. So this is how welds are made, and the bolts are different. So bolted connections, today's class is about bolted connections. Next class we look at welded connections. Bolts are methods to join structural components with the help of bolts. Uh, it is simple to use and doesn't require any extra equipment. Welding is a more complicated process than bolting, which is quite easily perceivable as well. And the process for establishing a bolted connection involves the following steps. Like I tried to explain, this is a formal way of telling it. The members to be connected are overlapped. Then bolt holes are drilled on the overlap portion. The bolts are inserted into the hole with washers at their position. Washer is a thin concentric circle kind of thin that we apply on this side, so that then the nut is inserted in the shank portion and tightened with the help of spanner. I think the washer is a very thin circle inserted in the bolt. It prevents the nut from directly in coming in contact with the steel and hurting it. So the nut is this part. See, this is the bolt. This is the bolt head, and this is the nut, and this thin thing is the washer. So you put the washer, then you put this nut, which is also a concentric ring thing, and then you tighten it. You screw it in, I think in the clockwise direction, and it gets tightened. And tightening is very important in a bolt to get its extra exact string that we want. And due to the tightening of the nut, clamping action is developed in the bolts, which are transferred to plates with the help of washer. So the tightening creates a sort of tension compression pair that develops compression between the plates and keeps them together. Advantages and disadvantages. Uh, th- these are the advantages. I should remove the disadvantages here. Yeah. So the design is simple. It is easy to operate, easier than this. Easy is of course a relative term. Here we are comparing it to welds. Bolts are low cost. They are low. They don't need any noise or uh, while they are being tightened. And overall, it takes less time, less manpower, and less skilled labor. Welding takes some kind of skill to do, and the availability, it's very easily available. Bolts are also we get from the factory. Bolts are ready made with fixed diameters. Those are also stipulated in the IS codes. And it is a non-permanent joint. A weld, once it is done, it is a molten material that has again become integrated with the plates, because the plate is made of a metal and the weld is made of some metal, and the metal gets, once it is molten, it becomes part of the plate. like you can understand there's a weld, but it is integrated into. But a bolt is still a separate entity. So if you unscrew the nut and remove the washer, you can take the bolt out. So it is a non-permanent joint, and there is no risk of heating operation like welding, and it can be easily replaced. Since it can be removed, it can be easily replaced. And disadvantages are the accuracy of the joints depends on tightening. The bolts generally have less axial tensile strength than welds. There is high effect of vibration. It is more weighty than the welds, and proper lubrication is required, and it requires protection against corrosion. Now we move on to the types of bolted joints. Yes. So there are two types of bolted joints, the lap joint and the butt joint. Lap joint, these four are lap joints. See here, the two members to be connected are overlapping. They are overlapped like this, and the bolt is applied. This is a cross section. This is the top view. This is the isometric view. Isometric view means a 3D view. This is the top view. That this is one plate, this is one plate, and this is one plate, and this dotted line signifies that this left side plate is below the right one, and these are the tops of the bolts, like these are the heads of the bolts, and this is the side view, so we can see the cross section of the plates and the bolt going in. So this is a lap joint, single bolted lap joint. This is a double bolted lap joint. See, here there are two rows of bolts. So when you see in the cross section, you can see two bolts here corresponding to these. And butt joint is different. The two members to be connected are placed end to end. Now, of course, if you place it just end to end, two plates, you cannot bolt it without, like, two plates placed end to end can be welded, because you can put a metal in between and melt it. But for bolting two members placed end to it, you need an additional plate on top or on bottom or on both sides, so that you need something to for the bolt to go in, right? If you put like these two things end to end, there is no way you can put the bolt, because the bolt needs some kind of overlap to be drilled into the two materials, and then into the two plates, and then like you put this overlapping, then you will drill the hole and you will put the bolt inside like this. Here the bolt will show up like this. So this is a single cover butt joint, where only one cover plate is placed, and these are the bolts. And this is a double cover butt joint, that you put one plate on top, one plate on bottom, and then you bolt it. So here the bolt goes through three plates. All in all the configurations we have seen so far, each bolt cuts through two plates, right? Here it goes to three plates. This is a mechanism. Now we move on to the mechanism of load transfer through bolts. The transfer of force from one member to another depends on the type of bolt being used. This transfer of force mechanism might either be bearing type, where the load transfer occurs by shearing and bearing, or slip critical or slip resistant, where load transfers occur by friction. So this is kind of critical, that you don't actually understand till you have been to an industry or you have done a research project on this. And this is basically, it depends on the slip critical bolts work on the philosophy that when you have two plates and you have bolted them, you have developed a compression so potent between the two plates, that if you want to pull them off, they are resisted by friction. You know that friction depends on mu into n, right? Mu is the frictional coefficient and n is the normal reaction between the two surfaces. So if you like pin two plates very very close together, where they have a high normal reaction transferring between the two due to the bolt, then the friction and the mu is enough to resist the tensile force that you want it to bear. So that is a slip critical bolt. And the bearing type, in the bearing type bolt, the load transfer occurs by shearing and bearing. So that is what, this is what we study in the, when we move on to the problems, you'll understand the shearing and bearing concept. Here it is the bolt. In this slip critical, it is actually the load transfer occurs by the plates itself, while here in the bearing type bolts, the bolt itself is the critical thing, that the bolt must not the bolt shank must not shear off, and bearing is a different kind of force that we'll look at later. So that is what the IS codes specify the bearing type bolts mostly. In slip resistant connections, the entire force is transmitted through friction, and the joints are not really subjected to shear or bearing. So the bolt is not critical here. The bolt is not going to break, because the load transfer is occurring due to friction between the plates. So the plates are danger. The bolts are first brought to snug tight condition and then tightened further. Joints with so tightened bolts are referred to as pre-tension joints. But when the load exceeds the frictional resistance, then slippage occurs, and consequently, the bolts will be subject to shearing and bearing, and will behave like a bearing type joint. So basically, this is the backup thing that happens. That you know that in a structure, if in a structure, a structure is a collection of several structural elements. So if in a structure a beam fails or something fails, it will first, the structure will not collapse immediately. First, what will try, it will try to redistribute the load in the entire structure, and if the other components together can take up that load, like find a way to transfer the load to the foundation, and then from the foundation to the soil, then the structure will not collapse. So that is the concept of load transfer. Load transfer is from the point of application of the load to the support, whatever that support might be. For example, in a cantilever beam, suppose there's a cantilever beam and you put a force, a transverse load at the tip. What is the load transfer that occurs? The shear force and the bending moment are transferred to the support, and if the support is able to take the bending moment and shear force, the support stays safe. But suppose the cross section itself was not enough to take that shearing force, then the structure will fail there itself. The load will not be able to transfer to the support at all. So here what happens is, in slip critical bolts, the main idea is that we will tighten it so much that the friction between the plates will take the force that we want to apply on the plates. But suppose the friction resistance is exceeded. Suppose mu n is not able to resist the tension completely. There will be slippage, and once the slippage starts, the friction resistance reduces substantially, because dynamic friction coefficient is much lesser than the static friction coefficient. Then the bolts will be subjected to. So far, the bolts were not being subjected to shearing or bearing. The entire load was being transferred to the plates. But once the friction of the plates is overcome, the bolts will become the critical elements, and they will be subject to shearing and bearing, and then they will behave like an ordinary bearing type joint. When the high strength bolts are not tightened sufficiently so as to significantly squeeze the plates together, there will be a negligible friction between the plates. On load application, the plates slip a little, and the loads will tend to shear off the bolts on the interface or press or bear against the side of the bolts. Now the load transfer will be like bearing type condition. So now what happens? Just imagine that, ignore the friction. In bearing type bolts, there is no friction between the plates. Ignore that. What happens is, there are two plates, there is a hole and a bolt going through that. Now if you try to pull the plates apart together on both sides, then two kinds of forces develop. One is that the bolt at the interface of the two plate, that circular cross section of the bolt, it will undergo a shearing force, because the plates are trying to separate. So the bolt cross section has a shearing force along it. And another aspect of it is that, the bolt hole that is in the two plates, the bolt will press against one side, because when the plates try to separate, the bolt will get pressed to one side, right? So the side of the bolt shank will press against the bolt hole, and that is where the bearing comes in. Bearing is a direct load transfer. Like, this is a shearing action, and this is a bearing action. Bearing is like pressing against each other. Shearing is two things cleaving off like this. So bearing and shearing always occur in pairs inside bolts. And the other aspect is the friction part that we generally don't look at in an undergraduate course. Failure of bolted joints. Now, these are what I these two I have already spoken of: shear failure of bolts and bearing failure of bolts. Shear failure of bolts. When plates slip due to the applied forces, shear stresses are generated. It may be possible that the maximum factored shear force exceeds the shear capacity of the bolt. Then the shear failure of the bolts takes place at the bolt shear plane. So what does that mean? That the we are applying a shear force, and the bolt has, every structural element has a capacity, and so long as the capacity is not exceeded by the applied load, it is safe. But if the factored shear force become exceeds the shear capacity of the bolt, it will shear off like this. This was the bolt, this is the shearing. Suppose this was the bolt shank, and the two plates are moving apart. Then at this point, at the interface, this bolt is shearing off. Like, it will, when you will see, once it has broken off, you will see that the bolt has cleanly broken into two, and both have a and both have still have a circular cross section along this part, along this interface. And this is called shingles shear because it is shear in the, this is the bolt, okay, the bolt, this is the bolt line that has broken like this, so it has already sheared off. And if since it is being sheared off in one plane, it is called single shear. And like I showed you in the case of butt joints, if there are two cover plates, sometimes there are three plates in question. So here there is double shear, and there are two planes in which the bolt has been sheared off. Then bearing failure in bolts. Here the bolt gets crushed around a semi-circumference. What is that semi-circumference? It is the part where it touches the bolt hole, where the shank of the bolt touches the bolt hole. The plate may be strong in bearing, and it may happen that the heaviest stress plate may get pressed against the bolt shank as shown. In general, bearing failure of bolts do not occur in practice except when the plates are made of high strength steel and the corresponding bolts are of low grade steel. Okay, this is an important point I forgot to mention, that the plates are the structural elements that the bolts are connecting. These plates may not be literal plates. This can also be, wait. This plate can, the plate that we are hypothetically saying, it could also be this flange part of an angle of this thing of a joist. It could be one leg of an angle. So this is what why are we talking about plates here? This is basically, the plates are the structural sections that we want to connect. Suppose the column is made of an angle cross section. This is the angle cross section, and we want to connect it to a beam of a joist cross section. So this web of the joist and one leg of the angle, or maybe this flange of the channel needs to be connected. That is where we are applying the bolt. We are connecting the bolt to connect the two sections together. And generally, the bolts are made of a very high grade steel, and the plates are made of relatively low grade steel. So generally, what happens is that, okay, so when there is shear force, see, when these plates are being pulled apart, there is no shear force developed in the plates. Okay, you can understand that because this plate just tries to move in this side, this plate tries to move in this side, and it is the bolt, it is this part of the bolt that is under shear. So while we talk of shear, it doesn't matter what the strength of the plate is. It is the bolt that is going to be cleaved off. But when we talk of bearing, what happens is the shank of the bolt presses against the bolt hole, and the surface of the bolt hole is a plate material, right? So when two structural elements are pushing against each other, like bearing against each other, then the material, this weaker material will fail first, obviously. So generally we take higher, the bolt is of a higher grade steel than the plate. It is the plate that gets crushed. See, here this is the bolt, and the crushing is, and the bolt is pushing against the bolt hole, and since the plate is made of a weaker material, it is the plate that is crushing. This is the bearing on plate and bolt. This is how the plate is being crushed, or it is undergoing a bearing failure. Tension failure of bolt. So bolt subjected to tension may fail at the stress area. In case any of the connecting plates are flexible enough, then additional force due to prying action has to be considered. This last line is confusing. We'll see later. But tension is a fairly obvious thing that we can imagine easily. It is just that the bolt is undergoing tension. The shank of the bolt is a cross section. It is undergoing tension, and just like we saw in that stress strain curve, we took a cylindrical steel specimen and applied tensile force on it. At one point it will fracture, right, at the point F. So that is what tension failure is called. Now, tension or tearing failure of plates. Now, see, when a joint fails, it does not necessarily mean that the bolt is failing or the weld is failing. Failure of a joint is that the entire joint mechanism is failing. Like it could be failure of a plate, or the failure of the section at that joint point, or it could be the joint itself failing. It is anyway that it gets disengaged. It gets disconnected, which was the basic purpose of the connection. Yes. So tension failure of plates occurs when bolts are stronger than the plates. Uh, this is what generally happens because bolts are generally stronger than plates, and tension on both the gross area, that is yielding, and the net effective area rupture must be considered. We'll look at it in a while in the examples. And then there is bearing failure of plates. When ordinary bolts are subjected to shear forces, then slip takes place and the bolts come in contact with the plates. Uh, as I said, that once the friction has gone, the bolts bear against the bolt holes. It may be quite possible that the plate may get crushed if the plate material is weaker than the bolt material. That is what usually happens, and this bearing failure gets complicated further due to the presence of nearby bolts. Or okay, this edge distance part we'll look at later, and it is not it is these are basically complications that are appear in formula in the codes. And there is a block shear failure. Many a times bolts may have been placed at lesser end distance than required, which may lead to the plate shearing out like a block. This is a block shear failure. The entire this entire region block shears off as a block. Here there was shearing of the bolt, just the bolt itself, and here the entire block will shear off. Uh, the possibility of failure increases if bolts used are of high strength and fewer bolts are used for making the connection. In this type of failure, shear on one plate and tension on perpendicular plane occurs, leading to failure of the portion of the plate. Shear on one plate, this is a tension member. Tension is occurring on this member, and there's a gusset plate. Is the cover plates are also called gusset plates. If there is shear on one plate and tension in the other one, a block shear failure may occur. Now, these are some specifications of a bolted design. Nominal diameter of bolt. It is estimated. This you don't have to memorize this because this will be provided in the codes. Where T is the thickness of the plate. Diameter of bolt hole is obtained by adding a nominal diameter of a bolt with the clearance provided. The bolt hole is slightly larger than the bolt diameter. Pitch distance is the center to center distance between two consecutive bolts. This this is how the force is acting. So along the line of the force action, pitch is the distance between the two lines of bolts. Gauge distance is a distance between two adjacent bolt lines. So gauge distance is perpendicular, measured perpendicularly. So this is a bolt line, this is a bolt line, this is a bolt line, this is a bolt line. The bolt lines lie along the action of the force, and gauge is the distance between the two bolt lines measured perpendicular to the force action. And edge distance is the distance from center of bolt to the adjacent end in direction normal to the direction of stress. So, see, this is the direction of stress is the horizontal direction of the x-axis, and the edge distance is measured along the y-axis. This bolt take the center of the bolt from to the nearest end distance, nearest edge, and the end distance is its complement. That is the one bolt line. Sorry, one bolt. The distance from the edge taken taken along the line of action of the force. So these are the force, pitch, gauge, edge distance, and end distance. Now, bearing type connections have three types of strength that we must look at: shear strength, bearing strength, and tensile strengths. These are all just formulas we have to memorize. That this this shear strength is FUB, that is the ultimate tensile strength of the bolt, and this is NNNAB. These are terminology that data will be provided in the problem. You just need to know how they are connected. NN is the number of shear planes with threads intercepting the shear plane. ANB is the net tensile stress area of bolt in each shear plane. So, in this case, this is a shear plane. This is a shear plane. In this is a shear plane, and the threaded area will be, whether it is threaded or not, it will be provided in the question. And NS and ASB is a different part. NS is the number of shear planes without threads intercepting the shear plane, and ASB is the nominal area of shank. All these will be provided in the question. This is the shear strength of a bolt, and by this we divided by root 3. And the nominal shear capacity of bolt for long joints, we have certain correction factors, which reduction factors, which is not very important for undergraduate courses or for general examinations like GATE. In bearing strength of bolt has this formula: VPNB is 2.5 kb. Kb is, I think it is generally taken as 1. We'll see in the problems later on. E and P are the end distance and the pitch distance. T is the aggregate thickness of the connected plates having bearing stress in the same direction. It is a total thickness. Fu is the ultimate tensile strength of the plate, that is of the steel material. and D is the nominal diameter of the bolt. This is the bearing strength, and this is the formula for tensile strength. The nominal tensile strength capacity is zero point 0.9 FUB A and B. Don't confuse this zero point 0.9 with the factor of safety. Factor of safety will be applied later on. FUB is the ultimate tensile strength of bolt, and A and B is the net tensile stress area of bolt. There is also a criteria of combined shear and tension. So what are these tensile strength, bearing stress strength, and shear strength? Why do we need these? Because if we have the applied shear force or applied shear stress on the bolt, the applied bearing stress developed in the bolt, and the applied tensile strength stress developed in the bolt, we have to compare after applying the factors, we have safety factors, we have to compare that the load is less than the strength, then it will be safe. And there is an additional criteria that we have to check, that is combined shear and tension. That is, the combined effect of shear and tension and shear is assessed by interaction formula. This is an interaction formula, that VSB by VDSB. Now VSB is factored shear force on the bolt, and VDSB is design shear capacity of the bolt. Now capacity will always be larger than the force, because if the capacity is less than the force, then that design is invalid. We have to redesign it and increase the diameter or increase the grade of steel, make it stronger. And similarly, TB is the factored tensile force on the bolt, and TDB is the tensile design tension capacity of the bolt. So this ratio squared plus this ratio squared should be less than 1. So this basically says is that it is not enough that VSB is less than VDSB and TB less than TDB individually, but this additional criteria also has to be satisfied. Now we look at some examples here. Determine the strength of 20 meter diameter of bolt grade 4.4 for the following cases. Now, what does 4.4 mean? That is, for Fe 400, Fe 410 steel, Fu is 410. Here it's mentioned, okay, the Fe 410 is the grade of steel. For that, the Fu, or the ultimate tensile strength, is 410 megapascal, and Fy is 250 megapascal. This is the yield strength, and this is the ultimate strength. And what 4.56 means is that we have to take the FUB as uh, this is Fe 410 is the plates, okay, and 4.6 is a grade of bolt. These gradations and the corresponding yield strength and ultimate strength are given in a tabular form in IS 800. You need to consider consult the codes while doing these problems, because either these data will be provided or you will be given a code to use. You don't have to memorize these data. For 4.6 grade of bolt, FUB is 400, so this 4 stands for, you'll make it 400, and the to get the ultimate, to get the yield strength, you have to multiply this, like 400 into 400 into point 0.6. 400 is the ultimate strength, and 400 into 0.6 is 240. And the partial safety factor for bolt material is 1.25. These factors of safety are also mentioned in the IS 800. So the net tensile area of the 200 diameter bolt is 245 square. This is found by this formula, 0.78. I think one second. 1 divided by 1.25, I think, is this point 0.8 into pi by 4 d square, which is the diameter. For lap joint, the bolts are in single shear, because in lap joint the plates are overlapped and the bolt goes through it. Shear strength of bolt in single shear, we saw this formula, FUB into A and B, because they, see, unless mentioned, you have to assume that they are threaded. So we just use the threaded part of the formula, this part. We ignore the NS and ASB part. It is just FUB by root 3 into this. Here the N part was also 1, because there is only one shear plane. So this, the formula reduces to this, and this gamma is the factor of safety. So ultimate strength is 400 into 245 millimeter square by root 3 into 1.25. This is the shear strength of bolt in single shear. The strength of bolt in bearing is this formula that we used. This formula that we found here, 2.5 into kb into d into t into fu. KB is the minimum of this. KB is not generally taken as one. KB is the minimum of it has to do with the pitch and the end distance. So the edge, these will be provided. These data will be provided to you. So E by 3 D naught, P by 3 D naught minus 0.25, FUB by FU, and 1. So the minimum of these is zero point 0.5 here. All these, see, basically all these formula of the difference between analysis and design is in analysis you have to remember the formula of everything, and in design all these are meant, all these will be given to you. In design all these stipulations will be given to you, or in most colleges, in some colleges they just allow you to use the IS code, so you must know where these criteria, where these clauses are given, but you don't have to remember these values. So KB is the minimum of these four quantities, and applying this in the formula, you know that here D is 20 millimeters, it is the diameter of the bolt. T is the thickness of the plate. So the main plates are to be joined at 14 mm thick. So 14 into Fu is the ultimate strength of the plate. Okay, here the ultimate strength we used as a bolt 400, but for bearing we have to use the ultimate strength of the steel of the plates. So it's 410, and divided by the factor of safety we get this. So now, so the strength, what is the strength? It will be the minimum of the shear strength and the bearing strength. The shear strength was 45 and the bearing strength was 104. So the strength is always a minimum one, right? Because if the developed stress becomes 45, it will fail in shear. It won't go up to 114. So the minimum of the two is always however many criteria you have to consider. You will find the capacity in terms of stress from all the criteria, then you will take the minimum, and that is the strength of the material, the strength of the structural element. The strength of bolt is minimum of these two, that is 45.26 kilonewton. Single cover butt joint with 10 mm thick cover plate. So single cover butt joint means this one. Single cover butt joint just has one plate, one cover plate, and the plates are connected end to end. So the bolts will be in they will be in single shear and bearing. The considered thickness for bearing will be the minimum of the aggregate thickness of the cover plate and the minimum thickness of main plates to be joined. So what was said, single cover butt joint with 10 mm thick cover plate, and the main plates are 14. So what happens is we will have to take 10 because that is the more critical. The strength in while calculating this strength, we have to multiply it by the thickness D. The thicker the plate will be, the more will be its capacity. So for a safer design, we will take the thinner plate. The two plates will have strength proportional to its thickness, and we will take the thinner plate dimension, that is 10 mm. So we calculate the shear strength remains the same. The bearing strength changes, does that we replace the D by from 14 to 10, and we get 82, and the strength of the bolt still remains, the shear still remains the critical criteria, and it's 45. Now double cover butt joint with 8 mm thick cover plates. What happens here? Here we have two cover plates. So these bolts are under double shear. There are two planes of shear. So this N will be 2 here, because Nn is number of shear planes with threads. We will assume there is thread so long as it is not mentioned otherwise. So here the bolt will be in double shear and bearing. The considered thickness for bearing will be the minimum of, here it will be the minimum of 14 and not 8, but 8 plus 8, because the cover plates will act in the same direction. So there are two cover plates of 8 mm each. So the aggregate of the cover plate thickness is 16 millimeter, and the thickness of the original plate is 14. So we have to take the minimum of the two, but that is 14 millimeter. So the bearing strength here remains the same as the previous case, because 14 is a critical one. And for bolt in double shear, we have the strength is increased by 2. So basically in this formula, the Nn is becomes 2 from 1. So here we had taken Nn 1. Here we take it to be 2, and it becomes 90. And still we see that the shearing remains the criteria. So the strength of the bolt is minimum of VDSP and VDN PB, the bearing and shearing, that is the 90.53 kilonewton. Okay, find the strength and efficiency of lap joint as shown here. Bolts of grade 4.6 and diameter 20 millimeter used for making the connection. The plates to be joined are 12 millimeter and 14 mm thick. So this is an overlapping joint, overlapping kind of joint. one plate is 12 mm thick, one plate is 14 mm thick. You have to connect them with a 20 mm diameter bolt. So the grade of steel for Fe, this is for the plate. Fe 410 has ultimate tensile strength of 410 and yield stress of 250. This you will remember. I mean, no one will ask you to remember this, but you will get to remember this when you do questions, because most steel used here you will find Fe 410 only. And for the bolt of grade 4.6, like I said, this tensile strength will be 400 and the yield stress will be 60% of 400. 0.6 into 400, that is 240. For 220 mm diameter bolt, diameter of the bolt hole will be 22. This d naught is basically the diameter of bolt hole, that is the nominal diameter of bolt plus some clearance. This will be provided in the question, or in the stipulations you are given. The tensile stress area of bolt is 245, as we calculated in the previous question. Partial safety factor for bolt material is 1.25. Partial safety factor for resistance governed by ultimate stress is also 1.25. These are all given in the IS code. In lap joint, the bolts are in single shear and bearing, where bearing strength is governed by the thickness of the thinner plate. So, two plates, one is 12 and one is 14 mm. So, we will consider 12 mm. The strength of the bolt in single shear is this. Here there is one shear plane. In overlapping joints, there is always only one shear plane, because there is no cover plate. There are two plates and the bolt goes through that. So the interface of the two plates is the shear plane. And so NN is 1, and this is the strength of the bolt in single shear. And this is how, with the edge distance and pitch, we calculate the KB. And the bearing strength is, in putting in this formula, just like last time. You will see this is the diameter of the bolt, this is the thickness of the plate. If 410 is the ultimate tensile strength of the plate, and 1.25 is the factor of safety. It is 98.4. So the strength of joint, see the this is the arrangement. Okay, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts here. Strength of joint per pitch and shear is 2 into 40. The shear strength of joint per pitch is in bearing is this. One second. I'm not sure why they use the 2 here. I just have to look into it. And the tensile strength of the plate is this is the formula we looked at earlier. This formula divided by the factor of safety. And these formulas actually, I'll see if I have the IS 800 here. Okay, so this is how the IS 800 looks like. This section 10 is connections. We are looking at bolts, so it will be on page 73. So this is the connections part. Here, here, if you go through the clauses, I would strongly advise you to go through the clauses once. If you if you read through all these, you will find that this is the formula we found. See, this is the formula we read there. That is the shear capacity of bolt, the bearing capacity of the bolt, and this is KB is the smallest of these four quantities that we were looking at. Tension capacity is this formula that we studied. And this is the combined shear and tension. So basically the thing to do for this course or this topic is that read through the entire section of the IS 800 to 2007. It is available easily online. And however the question is placed, it will have certain specific criteria, and you will find all these here, because there can be nothing asked in this course or in design otherwise that is not provided in the IS code. So this an is P minus d naught t. This an is the net area under tension. So if you see that the net area under tension will be the this is the pitch, this is the pitch it, and you have to subtract the bolt hole. This is a semi, the bolt hole diameter is 22 meter, so 22 millimeters. So there is 11 millimeter from this part and 11 millimeter from this part. You have to subtract because tension acts on the net cross section, not on the gross cross section. So you have to subtract the bolt hole diameter from here. Basically you have to subtract in the radius twice to get this area, and by t the thickness you have to multiply by the lower thickness, that is 12. So the strength of the joint per pitch is this, and the strength of the solid plate per pitch, here the to find out the solid plate, you don't have to subtract the bolt diameter, though this is not really relevant here, because this strength will always be higher than the actual tensile strength of the net cross sectional area, and that is what we need to consider. And the efficiency of the joint is you have to divide the tensile strength of the plate per pitch divided by the strength of the solid plate, assuming that there was no bolt hole. And the per pitch length efficiency will be different from the total width efficiency. Okay, so this basically covers the bolted connections. Next class we'll look at welded connections. These are some other questions, but they are just, they work on the same principles. You just have to identify the different, the variations is just that maybe the grade of the grades will be different, the number of shear plates will be different, and that's all. So the formula used will be basically these three only: the bearing strength, tensile strength, and shearing strength. So are there any questions? Okay, then I will stop the class. Next class we'll look at welded connections.